Okay, cool. I think we've already 12:04, so I'll just jump in. First of all, thank you all for joining um, this call. Um, I know it's a busy day for everyone out there, and I've taken your time in the middle of the day, so I really appreciate you guys dialing in for this call. Let me give a little bit of introduction and also probably the agenda for today's webinar call. Um, so my name is Arun Prasad. I'm the founder of a company called Somantra. Um, I won't go deep into what we do, but just a very small thing. We're a research-led company. We actually provide a platform to help brands grow brand mindshare on AI search, right? But today's call is really more as a way to share some of the research that we've done in this space and focus on one particular area, which is what are the best practices for reporting, especially what chief marketing officers or chief revenue officers ask for, and what are the metrics around it, right? It's a big topic. And within that, I just want to focus on one particular area, like, what are the right metrics for it? And this has been done based on some of the research that we've done. I'm happy to take questions on it. And also, by working very closely with certain customers or brands that operate in the markets in APAC, right, including Australia, by the way. Um, so our main hypothesis is that, like, a lot of people who come from the search engine optimization world, I think our view is that if you look at SEO and if you look at AU and GEO today, one of the big, I would say, foundational changes is that search is now a conversation. It's not typically a prompt or a single prompt, but it's definitely a multi-step conversation. And if you look at the volume of the conversations, people like almost like 2.5 billion daily ChatGPT conversations. There are 300 million daily ChatGPT users. This is an old stat. I think it's actually gone up to around 400 now. Um, and what's becoming more and more apparent is that AI search responses, they decide which brands are seen, compared, and trusted. And that's also the reason, if you look at OpenAI, yesterday in the US, when they changed the entry level, previously required, I think, somewhere around $50,000, you had to do a minimum commit for ads on OpenAI. Last night, they actually dropped it. They removed that barrier also. So in the US, it's moving really fast. And I believe that in Australia also, from what I understand, there are certain large brands who will or are actually quite close. They're actually in conversations with both Google and with ChatGPT for AI search-based ads. Now, one of the biggest drivers for that is because brands have reported that the referrals, that when they get people coming through the AI search responses, there's almost 30% better conversion rate. And that's why they're really excited about it. And I think there's a famous forecast that AI search visitors could surpass traditional search by 2028. So that there's a momentum building towards it. My bet is I think it'll happen by 2027. I don't think we'll even wait till 2028, simply because the commercial dollars, both on paid media or even earned media citations, a lot of that is actually shifting now. The focus is actually shifting to AI search. Now, what do we mean by a conversation, right? So a typical experience, and I'm sharing this as a real experience. Um, so if you like here in Australia, if you're typing something on ChatGPT and say, best value motorcycle insurance in Australia, you'll see a few brands coming in. So this is from a real response. So the five brands that showed up were QBE, NRMA, UE, Budget Direct, and Shannon's. Um, a typical approach that a consumer would do is then share more intent as to why they're looking for motorcycle insurance and what product, right? What is that motorcycle that they have? So here, the consumer has basically shared that they have a Yamaha Motocross 2023 model, and they're 25 years old. Now, what you'll suddenly see out here is that two new brands appear in the response. So here it's My Bike or Me Bike, however you want to pronounce it, and Amy. Um, and the brands like NRMA, Budget Direct, QB, they still remain in contention. As the consumer progresses in the conversation with ChatGPT, they're really using it as an assistant or a tool. So they're sharing that, oh, well, it's not a road legal bike. So what are my options here, right? They're sharing more intent. They're sharing more And essentially now the brand limits, they just come down to two brands, like National Motorcycle Insurance and My Bike Off-Road Rider. So it's giving very targeted brands, and also within those brands, what are the products that they should go ahead and buy. Now, AI search is excellent in handling conversations. I'll share the actual screen snapshot. So here you'll see the best motorcycle. You'll see that brands came up. As I progressed from the conversation, shared more, buying intent data. The responses were really good. But one of the things we have to be really careful about is, so for example, here, buying normal insurers won't work. Now, not every brand mentioned in AI search is a recommendation. And we have to get ready for this world, right? In SEO, it was slightly different. If you appear in the links, you would assume, yeah, you are still being considered. And that was the consumer mindset. If you, in AI search response, what you find is that it's really a trusted guided advisor. It's acting as a co-pilot for the consumer. And it's basically guiding them the path, right? So in the conversation. So which one should you choose? Which ones you should avoid? So here is trying to be helpful and saying, don't bother going with these brands, right? So we have to be careful about this. Now, the question that comes to brands typically, and this is something, when we work with brands, we realize that I think we have to go back to first principles approach, which is why bother measuring and reporting, right? What are the fundamental reasons why you want to measure and report? I think it's easy to say that, oh, we want to show our growth and all these things. But we dug a little bit deeper, we dived deeper. And what we understood is the real reason why even agencies, SEO agencies who work very closely with the brands, the CMOs and the C level, what everyone was really getting concerned about is the zero-click world. The reason is brands can't see what is shaping the answer, and they don't know how to join the conversation. In essence, that's what it is. Like, because we now website traffic is not most of the website traffic is kind of going down. People are, everything before people come to your website, a lot of that pre-coming to website conversation and guidance is now happening here. They want to understand what's going on. So the number one thing what people want to do is like, we want to model the conversations. Like, what are the conversations consumers are having? Secondly, they want to shape the media strategy. Now, for brands, especially, media has played a very important role. What we've seen with our data is that media will continue playing that important role. But I think one focus area for AEOG especially is the concept of topic authority. Like on a particular topic, if you want to join a conversation and you want to be, probably be an authority yourself, you definitely have to lean on influencers or even publishers who carry a lot of weight. Their recommendations carry a lot of weight. So identifying these partner topic authorities is definitely a very important role. And the last part is also about capturing the audience. And I'll come to this a little bit later, like, how do you become part of the AI conversation, capturing the audience, how do you remain engaged with them? There are new metrics that we'll share that are becoming more and more important, right? So how do you model conversations? So this is an example on our platform. What we do is on behalf of the brands, we basically just say, okay, we create like topic clusters. So in this case, it's the best value motorcycle insurance in Australia. There's a very high level discovery awareness. Then you go deeper into it, and you model. And we do this with both human and AI. So it's not just pure AI, because what we realize is that if you use a pure AI model without much human guidance, it can create, it doesn't align with how humans operate, or how humans ask questions. So here what we do is we basically look at like a topic, go under the topic, we look at like what are the kind of like buying intent queries, like when people are in a conversation with ChatGPT, what are the kind of queries that they answer? And then you go even deeper. So it's not just 2 levels or 3 levels, you go actually deeper and deeper and deeper. So if I'm saying best value motorcycle, I do motorcycle insurance for racing bikes, like a particular intent, then I basically go ahead and even say, I'm basically looking for racing bikes for a racing event, because I'm going to, in some insurance won't cover you for events and things like that, right? So you go ahead and you map this on a minimum. If you do like around 15,000, so we had done this research with saying, what is for a particular brand, like a medium-sized brand, what we realize is that you have to do almost 15,000 diverse conversational paths. And when you do this again and again, what you get is a rich tapestry of data for the brand along all these different conversational paths. So, for example, here, if I look at car insurance quotes, best car insurance, and this is from a real brand data. Can't mention the brand here, but what it helped them is understand that, for example, when people are just typing things like, "Hey, I want to do car insurance comparison," they're not turning up. But when people are sharing more important like information, I'm doing car insurance comparison because I'm buying a used car, they actually turn up. But when they're probed further on comparisons, they actually drop off. So for example, if you look at the third column here, car insurance comparison, they were zero, then it went up really high at 62%, and then it just dropped to 21%. And these are very important signals back to the brand, back to the folks who are creating the content, who are creating even the SEO strategy, for them to say, basically go back and say that, look, I think when customers are probing us further and further, we go down. The same brand, when they're talking about discounts, it's which is a highly competitive area, actually. Car insurance online discounts is a super competitive area. They did really good, and they're actually leading in it. So, for example, they were there at 0%, but then the moment a little bit of intent data came in, they went to cents. So they had really focused on doing like online discounts, and they were winning in that area. But other areas, they realized that, we have to do maybe a little bit better. We have to focus on those other areas, right? Now, what we finally realized after working with multiple brands is that in AI search, brand engagement metrics, which are once again based on brand mentions, are more useful than just a single prompt brand mention. If you just take a single prompt and say, I'm measuring you against prompts, it doesn't really add, you don't get high quality signals. But brand engagement, which is measuring the brand presence across all these diverse conversational paths about the brand, what customers are actually having, and actually is a very, very strong signal in the assets, because that's how humans are actually, they're having these conversations with the assets. So for example, you want to measure the brand across discovery, intent, conversational. And the other, I would say, reverse metric I would call is drop off. So drop off is really where you identify. So in this case, let's say you had a high level query, 4 brands appear, A, B, C, D. But when you go to the next level, when the reasons for buying express, if brand B and brand D adopt, it's important for brand B and D to understand that, oh, wow, okay, we're not being considered in the next level as a consumer progresses down their decision-making path. So the drop-offs are also becoming very important. Essentially, you do definitely have to model these human conversations. And while you're doing this, it's also important to measure where your competition is. So that competitive analysis of what some people in the branding world call brand battleground for different areas, I think that's also very important to go back and then measure and report. And identifying where you're having sudden drop-offs in engagement, right? And in most cases, we find these sudden drop-offs are happening mostly due to, let's say, content or media strategy not aligned. These are very strong leading signals to basically go back and signal back to the brand and to the content team and to the media team, saying that, look, this is an area where you may want to, if you want to build an online presence with AI search, these are certain areas you want to focus on. Now, I'll move to another area, which is, highly talked about in AI search, which is about citations. Now, I'll share a research paper at the end of this call. We did this for the Australian insurance brands. The data that we sourced, collected, processed, that also kind of, I would say it has more detail in it, but at a high level, what we found is that citations are a measure of brand authority. Like, how trusted is your brand? I think the new world, what's happening in AI search is called trust engineering. There are multiple different ways to explain it. We use the word topic authority or brand authority, right? And what we measure is when we just like, does your brand have heartbeat? And what I mean is like here by heartbeat is that does the internet actually remember you, right? So citations are an important signal that how well for different topics. So here, for example, we had almost over, I think, 1,500 topics, topic clusters. We measure the brand, and then what we found is there were many topics where they were trying to compete, but essentially they were just not, the citations were not surfaced. They were being mentioned, but there are areas where the citations are actually quite low, and that also signaled that they're not being the first preferred option for being leaned on and cited as an authority in that particular area. And the CROs also compared it to how much online, revenue are they raising on that particular product. And it was quite interesting. And they said, yeah, that matches. So that enabled us to measure and say that, oh yeah, okay, this is definitely going all the way into conversions, right? Now, citations can help you understand what's how's the brand shaping up, what's the brand perception in the AI model, but you have to be a little bit careful. So in the same example, where we said why normal engineers work, we see a citation from UE. When we dug a little bit deeper, because in our platform, we actually go to the page, we extract all the page, we understand what's in that particular page, the cited page. And what we found is that although in this case, ChatGPT is saying that, oh, often exclude motocross racing tracking entirely, and it's got a UE page in there, the UE cited page did not mention any such thing. So there are platforms that actually do just surface level. They say, okay, we've done a text, we looked at citation, so the citation and text should, they're aligned. In reality, we find that the error rates are significant. They're definitely in the high single digits. So they're not as low as, let's say, 1%, and they're definitely not as high as 20%, but somewhere in the middle. But these things, so you've got to be a little bit careful when you're using citations to make your decisions. What citations are extremely good for is to define how your product and service features are represented in the AI search response. So in this case, for example, when I looked at National Motorcycle Insurance, here we look at, like, it mentioned, their insurance covers gear cover replacement options. It picks that up exactly from their page. Right? So this is their page. It picks exactly all those things and then brings it back. So for product and service features, the AI is doing all the fact checking on behalf of the customer. And this we find is a repeated, the AI search engines have become, I would say, 90% accuracy. There are a couple of times they do go a little bit wrong or maybe irrelevant. I'll show you an example later of it. But in most cases, they do a very good job. So in the case of MeBike, also the transport damage, big one. And it's picked up from the MyBike here says we transit cover, we cover you in the event of while your motorcycles being securely transported. Right? Now, this is really important, and I think is for category leadership, like best value, cheapest. We found, especially in highly contested e-commerce or even insurance, online insurance, these kind of areas where you see a lot of online traffic and a lot of online decision making being done by customers. Category leadership, typically we find that almost most of the times it depends on third-party sites. It doesn't depend on your own site. So in this case, for example, best value motorcycle, QBE was coded as QBE. It's picking up from Finder. So the link from Finder, citation from Finder is there. And it's picked up, oh yeah, the best value is QBE. If it's cheapest premiums, budget pick, it's picked up NRMA. And once again, it's basically picked up of, oh, one of the cheapest in our database. So it builds that authority. It's taking the category authority from third-party media sites. In the case of UE, best balance of features and service, it's picked it up from the Forbes website. The Forbes citation was there, and it's picked that particular content page and then just brought it into the answer. And we found that this is happening again and again and again across every product service features, especially if you're doing product service feature comparison across brands. A customer is doing that in the AI search responsible. A lot of it just goes back and then looks at third-party sites. And then deeper, it's also doing a fact check against the company's own page. So the first level check is done against the third party, but it also goes back and it has a way of checking, whether, for example, is there language or content which clearly signals why, let's say, QBE or a UE best, why UE is the best for balance for features and service on their site also. Now, this is the metric which kind of developed something called brand consideration. This we did in partnership with clients. And this was really interesting for us, something called brand consideration, right? Because customers were creating a lot of content and they were saying, like, how do we measure whether it's working or not? The typical way for us was, we would go back and measure brand engagement metrics, do the conversation modeling, and then measure if the brand is being mentioned in each part of the conversation. But what really became important for the revenue officers or the product managers was like, how likely is it that the customer will choose our brand? Now, our first attempt, I'll first share what didn't work. Our first attempt was doing the same thing which you were earlier saying. We said, oh, tell me your preferred brand. Give me a rank list of brands. What we found is that AI models, when they give you by position, the position thing, 1, 2, 3, is not a good signal for the brand being considered. Because when we did the human trials, the humans would point out, oh, it said something negative about the brand. So, although it's number 1 mentioned. And we found this again and again. And then we said, okay, we need to come up with a different measure, use AI to leverage. And we basically came up with this thing of just saying, okay, let's try to measure, use AI and try to measure from each response, take every brand and try to categorize in each for that brand, how most, put it in one of those four. Is it most likely to be considered or may consider it unlikely? So we do this repeatedly for each brand, for each response. And then we found that in some responses, multiple brands were just clustered around something like may consider. So how do we differentiate? We dug a little bit deeper. We actually then went ahead and said, let's look at the concept of semantic similarity. We asked the AI to explain itself. Why is it putting them in may consider? And then we did a semantic similarity to, the may consider, that particular category title. And what we found is that gave us a much deeper mathematical measurement for how likely. And when we did the human trials, we found out, oh yeah, the humans are also choosing it that way. So what eventually what we figured out was that this is definitely a leading signal for content quality and media strategy, whether your content quality that you're putting out as part of your improvement cycles, right? For AEO, is that really working or not? And we have maybe an opinionated view, but our view is that brands that improve this consideration score, along with engagement, they will definitely come out ahead. So what does a brand consideration look like? So this is the real example. So if I look at best value motorcycle insurance Australia, right? Now here you can see that when we did the brand consideration scores, the top brand to be considered, and this was matched with human trials also, is like it's UE. Now, being first to be mentioned does not mean you're the most preferred, highly recommended. Now, when you dig a little bit deeper into it, you find that the question is best value motorcycle insurance, but the feature that's being highlighted for Budget Direct in this example is third-party fire and theft, third-party property damage options. The customer query is really about value. And in a value consideration, discount for low mileage riders actually ranks higher for the human. So they're looking for that in their subconscious. When a customer is saying, "Oh, I'm looking for best one," they're like, "Yeah, third party, okay, these are product features." But humans, when they're reading, they're like, "Yeah, can you give me a discount? Can you give me a cheaper price?" And that's interesting. Now, when we dig a little bit deeper, also, why, if you kind of look at it, why in this case, all these brands were in the may consider, not a strong most likely to consider. Budgeter, for example, in this case, like even a con was reported, which was saying some customers report slower claim processing times. So those negative statements are also picked up. Now, if your brand is being mentioned, there are negative statements coming up. You can actually go down in the consideration list for or preference for the customer, right? So here I would say we measure it more using semantic mathematical approach. So the lead margin that you has in this particular response is a 1.6% over RACV. So we measure this, and when you do this across, let's say, all those 15,000 conversations, and you do it, let's say, again and again and again daily, you'd actually get a rich tapestry of data, and you can actually get a, I would call it a competitive landscape or a brand battleground. Like for each, in this case, this is about car insurance quotes. And you can actually see how strongly is your brand is being covered. Is it in the most likely? Is it the may consider? Is it unlikely? Or if there are negative reviews, you actually end up in the most unlikely. So there are a couple of responses. We find that now people do get worried about negative reviews, but we've done this over 10 million responses here for Australian brands. And what we found is there are not a lot of negative reviews. And that's a good thing, maybe a bad thing for consumers, but it's actually a good thing for brands. Like, they shouldn't be unnecessarily be worried about. They should look at it and try to fix it. But I think but paying attention to the strengths that the brands have and improving on those strengths to enter the most likely and actually compete in that space is really more and more. So here, for example, you can, in the brand mindshare or the brand consideration map, you can actually see where each brand appears, how, where are customers most likely to choose them. And you can do this comparison. And this, once again, is a great caller. So if you're entering in the unlikely space, maybe you have a lot of content, but that content is not a great differentiator. And that's a very strong signal we found, that there's a lot of content. People create quality, a quantity of content. But that quantity of content is not necessarily in an AI search response really helping you enter the may consider and the most likely. And that's something else. We started working with brands and their content teams and the agencies, and we realized that this is something to be aware of. Right? So this kind of comes towards, just to wrap it up. And our view is like, what you measure and report definitely defines your strategy. And the best practice metrics for us were the 3: brand engagement, third-party mentions, and brand consideration. Now, in brand engagement, just to wrap it up, it does measure brand presence, but it does it across a full conversational journey, right? And it does it, at least the minimum conversations that you want to work is like, I would say 15,000 conversations, at least three multi-turn step conversation. And what it identifies is, where is your brand dropping off? And what is the competition? Is because competition is also measuring these things. Maybe in many cases, we find that early competition might be taking advantage where brand is dropping off and creating content. Now, that creates a bit of a race, but this gives a very clear signal back to the content team, back to either the in-house content team or the agency content team, where they can and then actually create content that answer customer queries in that conversational part, right? Third-party mentions, once again, media spend, in our view, will remain. It'll remain an important part, especially for, if you're trying to get a category leadership, you definitely need a trusted third party or a neutral third party in many cases to come back and be your product service and amplify that message. But that media spend also, now, because you have a statistical map, you can actually identify who are those third party topic authorities you want to work on. So you can be a little bit more clever about, like, where do I spend my media, right? And brand consideration, which is the likelihood brand being considered, is definitely, we found, one of the strongest signals, better than actually brand mentions, much better than brand mentions. We had like a double digit, we did this thing and we found that it's a double digit better signal of saying, whether you will get conversions or not through AI search. So where it does is it identifies a gap. Like if you've written a lot of content, but it's not differentiating, you might end up in may consider and not most likely to be considered. So, right, improvement in that content quality, it actually helps in fine-tuning the brand position. So a lot of the CMOs, what they realize is, like, this is really great quality data to work with the internal and external teams and defining that, okay, what is our brand position in the market? What does our messaging look like? And you also have to clearly find out that where you have gaps, what are the narratives, both content on your own website and third-party mentions, where you have to counter competitions. So once again, it goes back to model human conversations, leverage third party, topic authorities wherever possible, understand a competitive landscape, but be very intentional about which are the areas you want to go and compete in, and be very intentional in creating great content quality.